as well.
Yes.
All right, we're going to wait a moment here while the attendees trickle in through Zoom, and then we'll get started.
Marty Kaina is requesting to get in, admitted.
Juan, are you seeing that?
I'm not able to find Kaina in the attendees.
All right, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the, welcome everyone to the Workforce Development Live Q&A panel here at the 2021 CubeSat Developers Workshop. We're excited to have our panelists and presentations. Attendees join us for an engaging discussion about the presentation. Before we begin, I would like to thank our sponsors again. They're the ones who really make it possible for us to put this event on for free and not have to charge a registration fee. So we really appreciate their involvement here. Okay, with that said, we're going to start this discussion with a video followed by some live Q&A. And the moderator for the Q&A session is going to be Martin Minich, and he'll come on, introduce himself once the video is done. So if you could please start the video.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. My name is Martin Minich. I run the California Cybersecurity Institute here at Cal Poly, and we've got a great workforce development panel for you. I first want to introduce you to Kaina Pereira. Kaina is the Senior Advisor for Business Development and International Trade at the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, or GoBiz. Kaina has unique perspective around what the state is doing holistically, both historically in the future, around aerospace and space commercialization specifically. And he's going to take us on a little story and a journey about the economic opportunity available here in the state of California. Kaina?
Thanks for that introduction. Yeah, I'm Kaina Pereira, Senior Advisor for Business Development and International Trade at the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, or GoBiz for short. And GoBiz serves as the state of California's leader for job creation and economic development prioritization. And we offer a range of services ranging from site selection to permit and regulatory understanding, international affairs and export development, as well as our Office of the Small Business Advocate and a number of other programs, which I'll go into a little bit further detail as we talk about leveraging our assets. But it comes to this question, and I'm really interested in how this question develops and how we continue to invest in our asset classes, in our history, and our opportunities. And that comes back to the question of why California? And we've identified basically a three-pillar strategy. One, which is building on our history. Second would be leveraging our existing assets. And then the third, which is staying ahead of the pack. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on each of those things. First is our history. California is blessed by having over a 100-year commitment to the aerospace, defense, and space technologies industry in some respect, from the first flight in Carson, California in 1910, to numerous California companies providing the critical technological needs of advancing our mission to the moon, which culminated in 1969, to the recent efforts of the Mars landing and that helicopter that everybody's been watching on their Twitter feeds and YouTube accounts all month, It's been very exciting and very interesting for us, knowing that a lot of those components and a lot of the technologies were developed right here in California. Interesting aspects about our assets are not just the base contingency, which is obviously predicated by Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is the premier launch facility on the Western Range and is what we are hoping to become the range of the future. In doing that and leveraging our existing assets, one of the things that we've done in partnership with some of the members here, as well as some of the people listening in the audience, is the development of a memorandum of understanding on the infrastructure development priorities for Vandenberg Air Force Base as they seek to become the range of the future. That MOU was a culmination of both Cal Poly, the 30th Space Wing, Deloitte, now the County of Santa Barbara, as well as GoBiz, and a number of interested community partners and economic development partners in the area, trying to identify both the infrastructure development opportunities in and around the base itself, as well as with the city of Lompoc just off the base to identify those other types of infrastructure development needs that are off base, that are really underneath the state of California's purview, to be able to enable this technology to be launched successfully from what could be and what we're hoping is the range of the future. So why is California that committed to this base in particular and to these assets? Well, one, it leverages the commitment of both the Air Force pre the Space Force determination and the immense amount of industry clustering that already exists in California. Recently was announced that Space Missile Command at LA Air Force Base is to be redesignated as Space Systems Command. Well, what does that mean? That's going to become one of the three pillars of the new Space Force. And as such, will handle all the procurement needs for this burgeoning sixth branch of military operations. The beauty of this is that it leverages the existing cluster in the South Bay territory, which has also been expanding in the space technology fields with recent expansions of Spin Launch, of Rocket Lab, and of Relativity Space into that greater area. We also know that there's going to be and continues to be additional assets available in both land and workforce in that territory, considering their long history of being important in this arena, in the space arena. So I just mentioned the MOU that we signed with the 30th Space Wing and a number of other contingents in identifying infrastructure opportunities in and around Vandenberg Air Force Base. But why is that important to California? The results of this historic MOU related to the Vandenberg Air Force Base infrastructure project are expected to be dropped, any day now. And we hope that this incites increased interest in the deployment of capital for these vital infrastructure projects for the base and for commercial launch capacity. I talked a little bit about our history and about leveraging the existing assets. And now I'm going to go into the real crux of why California and why we think that this is an industry that not only has what I consider a 30-year runway, but potentially over 100 years of economic development opportunity, as evidenced by our endeavors in the aerospace and defense industry since 1910. GoBiz has actively participated in both the negotiations for sites and in the determination of incentives for a number of companies who have chosen to make California their home and have increased their commitment to our workforce and the opportunities that our state provides. Some of those have come through our flagship program at GoBiz, which is called the California Competes Tax Credit. And over the past 2 years, over $100 million in tax credits have been provided to companies that are servicing space technology or in the aerospace and defense industry. Companies such as Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Relativity Space, and Rocket Labs have all received commitments from the state of California as to tax credits for their creation of jobs in this exciting and opportunities, or this exciting space. GoBiz's flagship program, the California Competes Tax Credit, has over the last few years awarded over $100 million in tax credit contracts to companies and players in the aerospace, defense, and space technology systems. We will continue to aggressively market that program and to directly attribute those resources to companies in this space, because we understand the vibrancy and the opportunity is not a 1 or 2 year commitment with the possibility of being taken out of the game, but really something that they're making lasting investments into and have cadence cycles, which we expect to last between 30 and 50 years. Understanding that and understanding that deep commitment to both our region and to the assets that we have is our way of being able to stay ahead of the pack. An additional resource that is definitely of use for burgeoning companies, startups, and others in the space is the vast network of venture capital. And California has been consistent in obtaining at least 50% of all VC dollars spent in the United States. In the space industry, it's actually quite more distinct in that the most recent estimates show as much as 85% of venture capital dollars have gone to California-based space companies. This is one of those ways that we can stay ahead of the pack. We can continue to funnel resources, information, and dialogue between our VC counterparts, our private and public partnerships, as well as the foundational elements of our incentive programs to create opportunities for companies to grow, expand, and thrive in California.
Next, please let me introduce you to my friend and colleague, Paul Jurasin. Paul Jurasin is the Director of New Programs and the Digital Transformation Hub powered by AWS here at Cal Poly. Paul's got that very unique perspective on how to take existing problem sets, innovate different ways to solve those problems, and actually deliver real world results in real time. Paul, it's my pleasure to have you here today. Please tell us a little bit about the program and what you're able to do.
I'm the director of the Cal Poly Digital Transformation Hub. And at the Digital Transformation Hub, we focus a lot on bringing innovation processes and technologies to the public sector to help solve problems. Or other parts of government, nonprofits, or education, processes work relatively well. Lately, we've been looking at what kind of workforce the space industry needs, especially the commercial space industry in the next, say, 2 to 5 years out. One of the things we're looking at is the kinds of workforce that will be necessary to really support the space industry from an interdisciplinary approach. We can move to the next slide. And when we look at the space workforce, we're really looking at a variety of positions that need to be filled as the space economy goes in the future. Today, we know that the space economy needs people like engineers and physicists and mathematicians to help design spacecraft, design launch vehicles, and all of the technology needed to really operate in space, including the infrastructure that's going to be needed to support the space industry in the future. But one of the things that we perhaps have not looked at closely enough is the kinds of positions that will be needed outside of those well-trained professionals. So there's a gap for people like technicians, machinists, manufacturing folks, the people who will need to create the infrastructure, build the infrastructure, and operate the infrastructure after it's built. And you can also look at lots of other positions out there that don't clearly fit into the engineering and mathematics workforce. So, you can think about things like communications, cloud technology, cybersecurity, food and nutrition. If we have long-range space missions coming up, we'll need to be able to grow food in space. We need people that can do that. And to be able to do that, we really need to create a desire for students all the way back down to K through 12 to be able to inspire them to want to work in the space industry. And to do that, we really need to be able to provide programs for K through 12 students to be able to understand what they can really do in the space industry as you move forward. The STEM workforce, as we've talked about many times in the past, really leads into many of these jobs that are going to be needed in the future. Just understanding STEM and digital literacy will help folks move into the space workforce as we move into the future. So when you look at where the training is going to need to happen for these kinds of positions, we already know higher education is going to supply the PhDs, the master's folks, the bachelor's people who are going to supply the engineering workforce of the future. We know where those are coming from. What we're not so sure about is where to find the manufacturing folks that are going to be needed, and the machinists and the other more operational activities that are going to be needed. We need certification programs. We need extended education programs. We need to focus on high school level programs, and to really get that training built into the workforce that we need. An example of what we see happening is, you can go to the next slide, please. An example of what we see happening is, this is a slide of a screenshot that I took just this morning on some jobs that are open right now at Blue Origin. And Blue Origin, of course, is a space company. And if you look at the jobs that are open, they actually have 80 of these positions open up in Kent, Washington. And they're jobs like orbital tool weld technicians, machinists, engine integration technicians, and none of these positions require a degree. So there's a big workforce opportunity coming up where we really need to focus on how can we get our students interested in space and have them understand what kinds of jobs they can do to really participate in the space workforce as we move forward. At the Cal Poly Digital Transformation Hub, we're working with a couple of organizations that really help us understand the workforce needs for the space workforce needs of the future. Two of those organizations that we work with are Foundation for the Future, which is a nonprofit that's advocating for the advancement of space infrastructure, including workforce development, a workforce development program nationwide. So with that organization, we're working with them to look at all of the jobs that will be needed to be filled in the future, and looking at how we might educate those folks to be able to fill those jobs. Foundation for the Future is working with Congress to help fund infrastructure building for the future space economy, along with many other things related to space. Our other partner, Amazon Web Services, has been a partner with us at the Digital Transformation Hub for the past almost 4 years. And with that partnership, we work closely with them on innovation processes, looking at how we can help solve problems in the space industry, whether it's the defense side of the space industry or the commercial side of the space industry. And by doing that, we're getting a very close view of what kinds of jobs will be necessary in the future from a digital transformation standpoint. Basically, how can existing space infrastructure transform to be more efficient in the future? And there's a lot of room for that to happen. So the jobs at places like Space Force bases will require more technology-oriented people, people that know cloud technologies, people that can apply artificial intelligence and other kinds of technologies to help solve problems throughout the space industry.
Please let me introduce you today, Tim Chrisman from the Foundation for the Future. Tim is the co-founder and executive director of Foundation for the Future. And I'm gonna let Tim tell you about what the foundation's here for, what the purpose is, what they're trying to achieve. But I also want to highlight that his organization is playing a critical role in our space and cyber to schools curriculum delivery across the United States and across the globe. So Tim, thank you very much for joining us today. We're excited to hear what your organization's up to, and thank you for joining us on this educational crusade.
Yes, so I'm Tim Chrisman with the Foundation for the Future. I'm going to give you a quick overview on the efforts that we at the Foundation, along with a number of our partners, are working on to build out a nationwide workforce development initiative, really for the rest of us. And we'll get into that more here. Historically, the space workforce development model for the country has been geared by NASA for NASA. And it has been a rocket scientist and engineer heavy under the NASA Space Grant Program. And as we move further into the 21st century and this new space, commercial space era, we're entering a time where space workforce development really isn't a one-size-fits-all sort of model. We don't have the ability, either as educators or the focus nationwide, to be able to adapt existing models of workforce development that we use every day throughout the economy to the space economy. And we here at the foundation are looking to pioneer a method that doesn't leave out the rest of us, so to speak. We're doing that with a very simple proposition that there should be a way for a child who looks up at space to follow their ambitions to their conclusion and see their dreams realized in space. Right now, that looks like a student trying to be an astronaut or a billionaire. For the vast majority of us, that's not going to happen. And so we're creating this portal by which children, parents, educators, and employers can follow and create a pathway to space. We're doing this by working with schools like Cal Poly to democratize access to space curriculum and educational content. Now, initially, this is going to look very similar to a single portal online where all available upskilling, reskilling, and educational content exists. So whether it's middle school virtual training or a certification by Amazon Web Services, it would be in a single place. So parents, students, and educators can search, can find this, and know what's available. Ultimately, this will be built out further, but the goal really is a simple place to have access to and be able to show anyone of interest what they can do, how they can do it, and demystify the space educational process. We plan on doing this very similar to how the NASA Space Grant Consortium works, or the ROTC program works for Air Force and Space Force. And that's by networking with state schools, with local school districts, and enabling them to better serve the students that they know best. There's no reason why we at the foundation, who are working across the nation, should be pushing educational standards or even creating the content. The educators know what their students need best. And so we're simply trying to provide access to what content is available, and then let the educators use it or not. And we serve as an enabling asset, both in talking with federal and state governments to appropriate money and build out a more robust set of curriculum, but also to smooth access across states and schools. So yeah, I started a little bit alluding to this business model that we've adopted, really building on the work that NASA and others have done, where we are pushing the federal government, starting in fiscal year 23, to create a space grant program for the rest of us, where it's a grant-based system distributed through state, community, and technical education colleges, and ultimately to create and provide access to educational and workforce development content nationwide. We're doing this in no small part a partnership with Cal Poly to cross-level the content that exists, distribute that out. And so how we're going to do this is a fairly straightforward 4-step plan and prior military. And so everything's supposed to have easy to follow 3-step plan. We added an extra one so we could be cool. The idea is build a network of schools. We're right now reaching out to schools across the country to simply get a commitment that individual schools want to help bring space education and workforce development to their state. From there, we're doing essentially a census of what educational content is out there, what exists currently, and catalog that all in a single place, organized by grade level, education level, and if it's not virtual, where it's offered, how to find more information, and then direct links. We don't want to, as I said earlier, host or create the content ourselves. There's smarter, better people doing that. We want to provide access in a single place for people to be able to search. Once we've completed that census, then we know what exists and what the needs are. And we can start working with state, local, and federal governments and nonprofits to close the gap that we've seen. Find out what is it that local schools need and want and that isn't available in the network. Or find out what is in the network but needs to be licensed or exported or modified. And that's the step 3 here. And then the fourth is integrating this pipeline with employers. We've already talked with several, including Voyager Space Holding, to have an endpoint for these students. It's great to provide good content, useful certifications and skills, but at the end of the day, if there's not employment, it's not the same level of usefulness to the student. So we're trying to create a persistent record for students as they go through to be able to keep track of the classes they've done, the certifications they have, and if they want, then allow access to that, to employers that they're interested in working for. So the employer has also a one-stop shop to see what students have done what training and have what certifications and are thereby qualified or of use to that company and what they're hiring for. Our current network, as we're sort of in pre-launch phase, has a handful of state lead schools. As you can see, California, Washington, online, and in Pennsylvania. We're working with a handful of nonprofits who have space-related, either virtual or in-person education content. And then in talks with a handful of employers to determine what is it that they would want to see from these students. So these employers are not necessarily providing content or anything other than the requirements of what they would want to see out of a trained or skilled worker on the other side. And as you might imagine, this network is not complete by any stretch of the imagination. And even what you're seeing here is not a full representation of the full network of schools and communities that are interested. But one thing I do want to highlight is that this is not a space heavy set of schools and educators we're looking for. We're looking for those places that are the opposite of the stereotypical space school, not the Space Coast, but Lackawanna College that was founded by miners in Pennsylvania who wanted to educate themselves and better their futures. That's exactly the sort of story and message we want this network to have and resonate with. So with that, I'll close this presentation. If you want more info, you can reach out to me by email or phone, and I'd love to talk more. Thanks for having me today.
Please let me introduce our next guest speaker, Robert Meyer. Robert Meyer is the Director of Development of the California Employment Training Panel. I'm going to let Robert tell you all about the Employment Training Panel, but I also want to indicate that Robert is probably the linchpin in workforce development, reskill, upskill, or retraining the California workforce. If you in the industry need a partner to help you take the next step, Robert happens to be that individual. So Robert, thank you very much for joining us today. We're looking forward to hearing about ETP and what you're doing for the state of California.
I really appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to speak and present today. I am the Director of Economic Development with the Employment Training Panel. That is a California state agency that provides funding using a pay-per-performance contract, essentially reimbursing employers for the costs of job skills training that is customized to their needs. ETP is an organization that contributes to a healthy California economy by funding training programs that assist employers and promote a skilled workforce in order to compete in a global economy with constantly changing business needs. ETP contributes to a healthy economy by providing funding for training programs that assist employers gain a competitive edge and to promote a skilled workforce in California, helping businesses compete internationally and globally. ETP is a department within the Labor and Workforce Development Agency. ETP is led by an 8-person panel appointed by the Governor, Assembly and Senate leaders, and the Governor's Office for Business and Economic Development. ETP has 4 regional offices to develop and monitor contracts statewide. ETP has an economic development unit, which I lead, that is responsible for ETP's interagency engagement and project support. ETP is funded by employer wages. These are collected in the California Unemployment Insurance System. ETP is funded by employer wages. These wages are collected using an employment insurance collection means with the Employment Development Department. Since its inception in 1982, ETP has funded over $1.5 billion in training contracts, training workers for more than 120,000 businesses. ETP writes contracts with employers directly, as well as with what we call a multiple employer contractor. These are chambers of commerce, trade associations, economic development corporations, or joint apprenticeship training committees. They can also be training agencies, which include unified school districts, California community colleges, the California State Universities, and the University of California. ETP also partners with workforce development boards and workforce innovation and opportunity grant entities. The trainees that participate in an ETP contract can be new and existing workers. We call those retrainees. Those received upskill training for job skills customized to the needs of the employers. We also provide training for new hires. Those are individuals that are unemployed at the start of training and then placed into full-time employment. ETP is an important supporter for apprenticeship, and this includes pre-apprenticeship programs, apprenticeship training, as well as training of journey workers in a range of industry sectors, including manufacturing. ETP also provides training for small business owners and training specifically in entrepreneurial skills on how to effectively run and operate their businesses. ETP funds job skills training customized to the needs of the employer and the needs of the job. We exclude legally mandated training as well as generic training from our contracts to focus most critically on the needed skills of employers to help them remain competitive and to provide effective training for their workers. ETP contracts can feature multiple training providers as well as delivery methods that are tailored to the needs and scheduling of the employer. A unique facet to ETP contracting is the flexible delivery methods that we support, including classroom laboratory, online, video conference, as well as on-the-job training, which we call productive lab. A key flexibility as well is that the trainees can be trained by a range of providers. This includes internal training. This is like an internal training department or staff. This includes a university or community college provider, as well as third-party vendors, particularly in specialty equipment. A key facet to ETP contracting is that we can utilize a range of training delivery methods and providers tailored to the needs of the employer to deliver instruction within an ETP-funded contract. ETP is a partnership between an employer, a training provider in some cases, and the state of California. The contract structure does require an in-kind contribution to represent the employer's commitment to training. This is not cash on hand. This is simply wages paid, resources and materials utilized in the training or provided during training. Curriculum flexibility means ETP funds training customized for the needs of the employer and the occupation. ETP supports industry recognized credentials. And in the case of specific programs like Cadence or its forerunner Cascade, ETP has relied on the expertise of GoBiz, of Office of Planning and Research, as well as the program managers supported by federal funding to establish and maintain a programmatic fit related to the particular training topics of the contract. The program is a partnership, and employers provide a contribution to the contract, effectively matching ETP investment for the training to be provided. The wages paid, equipment, and materials utilized to support this equal the state's investment in the training program, ensuring the effectiveness of the training, as well as the opportunity for the employers to provide input and direction on the nature of the training provided. So ETP funds employer customized job skills training. This is tailored specifically to the needs of the job and to that of the employer. A specific advantage that ETP has is that the training can be proprietary in nature without disclosing that publicly. So this protects intellectual property concerns, as well as enabling the training to be cutting edge and most effective to the needs of the employer. In some populations, workforce populations, ETP can fund job readiness skills that will help a transitioning employee or transitioning worker or job seeker into full-time employment. Since the inception of the programs, ETP has partnered with GoBiz and the Office for Planning and Research in support of Cadence and Cascade. These programs are hugely important to the defense and aerospace industry sectors, which ETP has long supported. We rely on partnerships within these grant programs to establish the most effective training programs for the range of industry sectors supported. This includes specific training types such as cybersecurity, but also technology training in case of Cadence in advanced manufacturing, smart manufacturing, AI, 5G, fully network command and control, as well as commercial space. Commercial space is relatively unique given the geographic features of the Southern California coast and the incredible level of investment made on behalf of the workforce and employers in Southern California. The Employment Training Panel sits at the intersection of economic and workforce development. Not only are we able to directly partner with employers to train their new and existing workers, ETP can also partner with a range of providers, including chambers of commerce, economic development corporations, training agencies, which do include the California Community College System, the California State University, and the University of California, to provide a range of support opportunities. On the workforce side, ETP can work with the local workforce development board or its statewide affiliations with the state board and the California Workforce Association to provide tailored programs that create career paths and training opportunities for workers that are interested in not only working in space or working in aerospace and defense, but seeking jobs that will lead to career paths and the next generation of jobs.
I want to thank everybody for joining us today on this exciting panel. I think you see from a state and national perspective, Cal Poly is really your partner in both education, workforce development, economic opportunity, digital transformation. If you have any questions, concerns, or want additional answers, please email us at the contact information provided as a part of this presentation. We're now going to open the floor up to questions and answers. We'll all be here for another 10 or 15 minutes to field and respond to these questions in real time. And we're looking forward to these conversations or the conversations that will develop from our presentation. Thank you very much. Yeah, great. So, for everybody who watched that presentation, we're doing what we've got to do under COVID. I appreciate your flexibility in mediums, but I think where I'd like to start is if you wouldn't mind, I know that Vandenberg Air Force Base will be redesignated Vandenberg Space Force Base this week or next, but can you give us any more insight on where can I find more data? Where can I find more assets around Vandenberg Space Force Base?
Absolutely, and unfortunately, I'm having trouble getting my video to work. Oh, there we go. Nice to be with you all. So the question was about how you can get more information about the efforts that are going on in Vandenberg. As they relate to the MOU, we have a group of individuals and organizations who are part of that, from Deloitte to a regional economic development partnership in the Central Coast called REACH. And REACH is really the ones who are spearheading the outward facing or the promotional elements of the MOU. And so you can check it out on their website, which I will post in the chat in just a few seconds. If you want to read the context of the MOU itself, which is about the identification of infrastructure priorities as it relates to the master plan, that's available on our website, which is business.ca.gov. And you'll go to publications, and then under publications, under California's Business Investment Services, you'll see the MOU there. Additional resources and understanding about what's happening as it relates to the Space Force transition can obviously be found at Vandenberg Air Force Base's website as well. And then we expect there to be, the changeover was postponed from next Friday, and I believe it's going to be the following Friday. And then there's some more information about what that transition is going to be, and as well as some other designations for new heads of the military operations. I do expect some promotions to come in line for some of the current base operators, as well as they start reshuffling the deck around the country and to all the different Air Force bases that are going to be redesignated over the coming next 3 to 6 months. So, but I'll send some information in the chat just a second.
I got one more question for you. If an industry or commercial entity wants to get in touch with GoBiz, what's the door? Where do they come?
Yeah, so you can email me directly, or you can go to our website, which is business.ca.gov, and fill out what is an intake form. Another way to reach us is through your local economic development partnerships, or even through your trade association. All of them have direct connective tissue to us, including your chambers of commerce. If they don't know how to get in touch with us, then one of us on this call or somebody in the world does. But at the same time, the best way to reach us is business.ca.gov.
Thank you very much. I think the panel also, it's really neat to see Tim, Paul, and Robert. There's a synergy there between workforce development all the way down to K through 12 through retraining the California workforce. Robert, if you wouldn't mind, talk to me about that connective tissue. You mentioned the community college, you mentioned the CSU, you mentioned the UC, but that non-traditional workforce is so important to the state's economy.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to present on the panel. I really appreciate the support that we've had for the summit. It's been very interesting thus far. Regarding that level of partnership, one of the real key aspects about ETP is that it can be deployed in so many different areas based on a particular type of project that needs to be funded. If we're talking about a very specific industry sector, we might have an organization like CMTC or the CMTA, California Manufacturing Technology and Consulting, which is the Holland's Manufacturing Partnership in California, as well as the California Manufacturing and Technology Association, be able to hold a contract and specifically focus towards the broader aspects of both technology and manufacturing. We also work directly with the employers, and we work really in a specialty way with regional partnerships. So this might be a community college or a network of community colleges that specialize in addressing specific industry sectors, and they're leveraging the relationships that they have with employers around workforce development to build partnerships that are really discrete in being able to address the specific workforce issues in front of employers. Cybersecurity compliance, the rapid movement driven by COVID, onto digital platforms for both networking and communications, as well as technological management of projects. These are, you're seeing really the formation of what employment might look like in the next several years. If you couple that with the investment made on specific workforce aspects, and we'll take commercial space and particularly Vandenberg, we're looking at an opportunity to support not only the manufacturing that's going to be there, but we're looking at infrastructure and construction. We're looking at possible accesses to permitting and support for the communities that are going to be supporting these efforts. I like to think of this workforce panel as really the proper group of villains to be able to implement and maximize the impact of the investment that's available to us. I want to most effectively leverage the relationship that the employers are having on this industry sector to be able to maximize the benefit for any worker or job seeker that wants to work in Southern California. They want to be able to buy a home. They want to be able to stay or relocate to these communities. And, it's a fantastic place to live in California. You have to acknowledge that. So these are all things that we try and leverage, but the partnerships, I think one of the things that we would just ask is, what is the training that's needed and how can we best serve the needs of those employers? So, Marty, you really take a fantastic lead at Cal Poly in so many different areas, from advanced tech and engineering and manufacturing to irrigation and water technologies, which are absolutely vital in so many ways across the state. So, that's, I think, how we can really work together on this type of thing.
Yeah, and the thing I'm really hoping everybody hears is that if you're an industry or a commercial entity in need, you can get the training you need in your local area from a local provider. You don't have to leave the state. You don't have to go somewhere else. This ecosystem can support your reskill, retrain, or upskill requirements.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add, we can leverage the internal training capacity of the employers to train their own workers. So that's the one thing that's relatively unique about ETP. Almost in every other sector, we're networking and combining to see if we can leverage additional resources or programs to try and maximize the benefit of the employers that are interested in training. So it literally starts with the what if. So that's it. Sorry.
No, it's perfect. Paul, before I bring Tim in, because I want to stay California centric, but Paul and your view of the industry partnerships, how are you getting this perspective? How are you seeing the opportunity, and how can we present that to the community at large to make them more aware?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we do at the Digital Transformation Hub is we look at challenges, and we try to figure out, what's the solution to that challenge by understanding who's our customer that's going to benefit from the solution, right? So in this case, it might be the people who are looking to work in the space industry or looking for jobs in whatever state they may be in. So what we want to be able to do there is to really bring those folks in, and maybe today they're an agriculture specialist, and we might look at how can that agriculture specialist in the future work in the space industry. And and you think about long-term space flight, and we're going to have to be growing food in space. So those agriculture people that are working in agriculture today on the ground might be able to support the space industry in the future. So one of the things we want to do then is to look at the needs as we look into the future for the space industry, and then look at what we're doing today on the ground and look how we might be able to upskill some of those folks that are working in various industries today, machinists, welders, agriculture people, and looking at what we might be able to do to get them into the space industry as it grows in the future. So, that's kind of our goal, to really understand the problem, understand the people, and then understand what the solution is and what kinds of training are necessary to get there. I know Tim looks at a lot of this as well, and he's looking at it on a kind of a nationwide scale, and we're helping him out with that.
No, I think that's a perfect segue over to Tim. And Tim, while we're giving everybody the California flavor, it's super exciting to have you looking at the national footprint, identifying trends, patterns, strengths, weaknesses, gaps, opportunity. Can you just kind of talk about I want to know, like, what was the seed? What was the seed that made you say space commercialization is where we're going? Because I think what people don't understand is space commercialization is literally transforming the planet and human colonization in real time. So I really want to know, like, how do you stumble on the idea, and then give me that national perspective, because it is a holistic problem set.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Marty. So I usually ask people, do they want the exciting version or the true version? When they ask me that story, I'll just stick with the true one. So the honest answer is I finished writing a book on the future of space last year, and it was meant to be a nonfiction book about experiences people would have in space over the next 100 years. And I realized as I finished it, I didn't believe anything I had written. It was all true, like all science was solid, but I didn't believe I would ever see any of it, because to me, space was some sort of magical place that billionaires and, you know, successful presidents went to after they became an astronaut and grew up. Like it's like crazy hard to get there. I'm never going. And I realized I had two choices. I could wait for someone else to make space real for me, or do it myself. I'm not a patient person, and so I decided to start doing it myself. And that's the sort of genesis of the Foundation for the Future is, how can we make space boring enough to be real? Make it so it's no different than anywhere else humans live and work. And that's what we're doing. So whether it's infrastructure investment from the federal government or workforce development, we can take workforce development right now by the horns and start. We're pushing Congress to create new tools for Wall Street. That's something that is going to need outside help. But as Rob was talking about with the programs and upskilling, a lot of this stuff exists now. It's just a matter of collecting it, bringing it together in one spot, and then showing it to employers, to teachers, to students. And that's really what we're trying to do across the country, is provide a single place where space-related upskilling and workforce development can live. We don't need to make the content. We don't need to host it. We just have a link, sort it by what it is, who it's for, and where it's at. And then from there, we can start building out the list of what's needed, where is it needed, and how can we grow a workforce to make space real? Because right now, it's a bunch of rocket scientists and astronauts, and we need the rest of us to start supporting them, because I know good and well there is not a billionaire going to space who will make their own drink, fix their own Wi-Fi, or repair a leak in their station. So some of us have got to be there to do that. And if we're already going, let's do a bunch of other cool stuff while we're there.
No, that's a great story, Tim. And I think that's what people don't understand. The original Space Force or the space workforce is a legacy of the Apollo era. And what's really exciting, both from an industry's perspective and a commercial perspective, is that all these new services, technologies, skills, capabilities are flooding and transforming what that looks like. It's no longer a government-owned space. It's actually the responsibility of the Department of Commerce now instead of the DoD. And a lot of people don't know that. And Tim, your expertise, your legislation view, your policy perspective, that national oversight, it's going to be critical as we move forward into this journey. Paul, I want to hit you one more time. And I want to hit you from the perspective of what can people do to get involved?
You mean to get involved in the space economy?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things people can do, and one of the things that we're doing to make that that option viable for people is to, again, kind of back to that same answer I had before, is to really understand the needs, right? The last time I talked about the understanding the needs of the people that might want to work in space. on the other side of it, we have to understand the needs of the companies that are operating in space or will operate in space in the future. And we have to try to meet those needs with the folks who are interested in working in space. So, you know, you need both sides. You can't just have one. So understanding, again, what the needs are of the industries and the government from that standpoint, right? So there are launch facilities that probably are not built yet today. There are launch facilities that exist already. They all either need to move forward in a digital transformation so that they're more efficient and can take advantage of the latest technologies that are out there. And we're helping them do that. But to do that, they need people that are educated in, as I mentioned before, in cloud technologies and digital technologies to be able to apply those skills to these various activities that are going to be needed, right? And again, things like infrastructure and the technology launch facilities, building spacecraft, operating spacecraft, all of those sorts of things. So I think there's two sides of the picture. One is trying to get people who are even down into junior high, high school to understand what's going to be possible in the future and get them interested in wanting to do that. And then on the other side of it, the industry needs to be able to identify the jobs that they're going to need in the future, and we get to match those together.
Thanks, Paul. Hey, we got to wrap this up. We've got another session coming up, but I do want to say and highlight California is open for business. The opportunities are abundant. The support structure you will have here is endless, and we're looking forward to being your partner on that space journey. Thank you very much, and it's our pleasure to talk to you today.
All right, thank you very much for the insightful panel, and we hope to see everyone in the next session here in a couple minutes.